or linguistically diverse populations, you know, whether they're successful in math or science in the United States really depends on how competent they are in English as a second language or the English language. Because if they're not comfortable with English or academic language, this may sort of, ¿cuál es la palabra que estoy buscando? Not put them at harm, but it could inhibit their chances of being successful, or it could serve as an obstacle to their learning experience. So like the case of the video from last time, the student may be intelligent or may know how to solve a problem, but down to the fact that perhaps they're not, you know, competent or fluent in that language, it could very much so ruin that learning experience for that subject. So since 1989, there have been national standards in place to discuss the subject knowledge that students should know per grade. So there's many different national councils that create these standards. So for instance, the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, they have their own standards. The National Council of Teachers of English have their own standards. The International Literary Association, the National Research Council, the National Center for History in the Schools, etc. So all of these different organizations and groups are filled with experts, teachers, scholars that look at evidence-based teaching and other resources, and they also look at other countries and what works in other countries and what works in different populations, and they create these guidelines, right?
Isn't WIDA involved in one of these councils?
As well, but you know, we're not discussing them yet. But as well, WIDA is there as well. So there's content standards like the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. This is a hyperlink. So the act that emphasizes equal access to education, aiming to shorten the achievement gaps between students by providing federal funding to support schools with children from impoverished families. So we have acts that are in place to ensure equity in marginalized regions or populations. Now, whether they function as they should or whether they successfully provide the same quality of education, well, that's another story. We also have the Improving America's Schools Act of 1994, and also the famous No Child Left Behind Act, or ESEA. So mandated English language proficiency development standard and compulsory desegregation of assessment data. More on this later on in future classes, but we're just mentioning these, you know, as an overview of all the different acts in place to ensure that every student gets a shot, right? And that these are revised. And also that these are notoriously controversial. There's always a lot of debates surrounding issues of education and what populations are being overlooked and whether there's enough being done. So WIDA. So we also have the WIDA standards, right? So the WIDA English Language Development ELD Standards Framework provides a foundation for curriculum, instruction, and assessment for multilingual learners in kinder through grade 12. So the WIDA is used in the United States a lot, right? So the ELD Standards Framework is centered on equity. So the famous word that we've been using, and fosters the assets, contributions and potential of multilingual learners. That is, people from diverse linguistic backgrounds. So the WIDA is there to ensure that people from different backgrounds have equal access or, you know, justice in their education. So the framework consists of 4 components, the WIDA framework, ranging from broad to narrow in scope. So WIDA ELD standard statements, so key language uses, language expectations, and proficiency level descriptors. So tenemos standards, key language uses, language expectations, and level descriptors. So those are the 4 components. Están aquí en that figure. So together, they make a comprehensive picture of language development, or they aim to provide a comprehensive language learning experience by having these standards in place, these specifications of what language you should know, and specifications of expectations for content, ¿verdad? Aquí está goals for content-driven language learning, key language uses, so what language should they know in each discipline, proficiency, so the continuum of language proficiency, what level should you be in, etc., right? So here's a small video of the No Child Left Behind Act. I'm going to be sharing this video. Let me see if I can. It's a very short video so that you can watch, and then we can discuss a little bit about the No Child Left Behind Act. So if you go to your chat, I'm going to be sharing the link to access this video. Oh, wait. That's not the link. One moment while I try to retrieve the link. So I've now shared the link for the No Child Left Behind Act. It's around 2 minute, it's a 5.5 minute video. And afterwards, we're going to discuss the content. So if you can go ahead and click on that link on the chat. Can everybody see it okay?
Yes.
So this act was in place. Sorry, did you finish or not? All right.
Professor wasn't able to see it.
That's okay. Essentially, so the No Child Left Behind Act was a measurement, right, by the government to ensure equity and equality in education across different populations, right? And by taking different measurements that you saw on that video to ensure quality in education. It was a very notorious act that was replaced, right? It was, again, as we said, when we talk about standards and acts, they're never the same and they change according to changing circumstances, politics, people who are in power or governing, right? So the funny thing is that our book for this class by the WIDA author, Gottlieb, I can't say her last name, she talks about the No Child Left Behind Act, right? But this book is published in 2016. By the time that this book is published, No Child Left Behind has a different name. Creo que, what was it? ECEA, also known as the No Child Left Behind. But by 2015, the No Child Left Behind Act actually came to an end. Eso me lo dijo Lisandra. Actually came to an end, right? So that when Obama came in, this was when Obama was president, they substituted it with a new law under a different name that sort of solved the flaws of the No Child Left Behind Act. So the new law that replaced the No Child Left Behind is called the Every Student Succeeds Act. And, yeah, the Every Student Succeeds Act. Again, this is a game of power and a game of politics. So maybe you'll have a lot of the same things from the previous one, but then it solves some of the criticisms and issues of a previous act, right? And perhaps one of the greatest ones is one that was raised by Maria Angeli when talking about the meta, the whole reliance on standardized testing. So if you go to this link that I'm providing on the chat, it gives you information about the law that substituted the No Child Left Behind, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act. So this new act is over 1,000 pages long. So obviously very difficult to sort of probably put into practice. But the main takeaway point is that it gets rid of this over reliance of those types of tests. So if you go to the link I sent you, it says, for instance, want you to pay attention to the part of testing. So annual testing. So states still have to test students in reading and math once a year. as well as once in high school. Okay? Well, where's that information of standardized tests? So that parents can decide to not have their children take a standardized test. So the new law doesn't create a federal opt-out option for parents, but it also doesn't stop states from having their own opt-out laws. Parents don't want their children to take state-based tests. So there's certain things that have changed, but essentially this act that was so controversial and in place for 13 years changed with somebody else in place. So again, this kind of goes to show that when you're adopting standards or following language policies, you have to pay attention to changing politics and changing dynamics in those in charge of education. So did anyone hear about the Every Student Succeeds Act before? Exactly. So it was substituted by Every Student Succeeds. Yeah, so has anyone heard of the Every Student Succeeds Act?
I've heard of it, but it's not something that I can say that I'm an expert at, but I have heard of it.
So again, the article I sent shares the differences to what you saw on the video. But essentially, you know, again, politics, when there's differences in visions and there's a lot of negative connotations attached to something previous, the idea is that you want to introduce something new. Maybe you change the name and change some of the things from the previous acts that didn't work. But yes, so in Puerto Rico, we don't really deal much with that. This is much more the case of education in the United States. So it's important to know that these things are in place, especially, you know, if your end goal is to end up teaching in the mainland. But right now, as a Puerto Rican teacher, you need to know that your own standards and the things that you should abide by are more centered around the Department of Education that does look at these acts, does look at the US for inspiration, but also if you go to the Department of Education standards and you look at their background and their vision, they also claim to take information from other standards from European countries and other language models. So it's not just the United States and all of these different acts and standards in place, but you know, they're taking from everywhere. So ideally, you want to be focusing on the standards that are in place for our country, because our country standards are more adapt to our demographic, which is Hispanic, versus, well, the United States has a host of different things to consider when they're making these rules. ¿Verdad? So, all right, so we continue.
So what if those rules don't work? Like, for example, in Puerto Rico, is there any way we can adopt other standards to enhance the ones present here?
I think that at a micro level, the teacher is always kind of, you know, we have these language policies that exist that are above us, that are placed upon us by the institution. But at the micro classroom level, there's nobody monitoring teachers on a day-to-day basis. So no hay alguien grabándote, making sure that you're following up on the standards and whatever. So really you have agency to take control of your class and do what you can with, you know, what you know you're expected to do. So therein lies the problem, right? This is why there's so much inconsistency, maybe throughout grades and with teachers, porque todo el mundo está haciendo, you know, their own version or whatever they want, right? So that's not good in that sense, that maybe the accountability se va por la ventana because maybe, teachers aren't being monitored as much. But at the same time, it's good, because we maybe to a certain extent in the micro classroom level, teachers are flexible enough that, they can sense their classroom and adapt to their students' needs. But again, these standards exist, but we all know that in practice, todo hacemos diferente, according to what we think is best. It's only when la clase está siendo auditada that you have perhaps a performative class or the ideal class, no? Yeah. So again, standards are there and they have a reason to be there, but they also have their cons, their pros and their cons, and you have a lot of politics coming into it, people changing names, changing the nitty-gritty expectations, right? So we have also the Bilingual Education Act. So this is again for the United States. It attempts to foster successful acquisition of English for those who are linguistically diverse in the United States. But at the same time, they also want to preserve their own culture and respect the students' background. So it's noted as the first official federal recognition of the needs of students with limited English-speaking ability in the United States. So this has been in place since 1960, right? So it is important for those working with students with limited English-speaking ability to gain an understanding of the growth of bilingual education in the United States so that they are better informed when faced with current issues. So it's good for them to be informed. It's a little bit different for us. And of course, we also have the Common Core State Standards for English Language, Arts, and Mathematics. This is a hyperlink. Okay, I'm going to click on it and also share. So these are standards in place in the United States. They have a PDF file for English Language Arts and Literacy Standards. Again, these are quite different to the ones that we see in Puerto Rico. You can also download the standards. I'm going to share the PDF file. I suspect, again, that a lot of these standards assume more linguistic knowledge from their students than our standards would, which again is a reason why if you're constructing a class in Puerto Rico or you're thinking about your English language students, don't look to the United States to model your class, but look at whatever is in place for our own country, because whatever is in place for our own country matches our demographic and the needs of our demographic. Mientras que Estados Unidos, all of this is built around US. So one moment, please. So this is for the United States, the Common Core State Standards for English, History, Social Science, Technical Subjects. So again, these documents are quite lengthy. They're detailed. They give information of different grades and the standards or expectations for across grades. You look at this, for instance, let's look at an example. Distribution of literary and informational passages by grade. So grade 4, literary 50%, informational 50%. So as you see, as the grade becomes higher or increases, informational or technical or more field specific increases, maybe literary knowledge of a language decreases, right? Because we want our students to become more competent about specific subjects or information rather than stay in the arts world. Same would go here in terms of different skills or linguistic skills: to persuade, to explain, to convey experience. So in grade 4, we see a sort of equal expectation according to these standards: to persuade, to explain, to convey experience. But perhaps as the grade increases, maybe we want our students to be able to engage critically and analytically in language. So when we persuade someone, persuading is by default kind of like the act of debating or using critical knowledge as to why something should be, right? So it makes sense that, grade 12 would require acts like persuasion and explanation, because these kind of linguistic skills are higher level and they represent critical thinking, versus conveying an experience is a little bit elementary. We can have students from lower level tell a story or an experience, but lower level students would have perhaps limited cognitive capacities to persuade someone or to explain something technical. No, so again, we sort of see the evolution of skill according to grade, and also the evolution of text knowledge or textbook knowledge from something from the more narrative literary world to more concrete informational higher level knowledge. So again, these kind of standards appeal to logic, appeal to the psychology of education, appeal to the ever-evolving cognitive skills that we have as human beings, from our capacity when we're young versus our capacity to analyze and criticize as we grow older and more experienced, right? So some of these standards are appeal to logic, but as well, when it has to do with language, it's also built around the idea that we want to construct a successful English language learner, no? So you can have a look at that on your own. I just wanted to have a show you the document very quickly, but I don't want to stay too much there. Yeah, so those are the Common Core state standards. So importantly, the standards provide clear signposts along the way to the goal of college and career readiness for all students. And this is a video of what is the Common Core. And I'm going to share this video, and it's 2 minutes and 31 seconds long, but we're going to go into a break of 10 minutes, and then when you come back, you can watch this video and we'll talk about the Common Core, okay? So 10-minute break, watch this video and pick it up here, okay? Sounds good? Yes?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Go to the bathroom or whatever.
Thank you.
Right. So hopefully you've seen the video. Right? The Common Core video, what it stands for, whether states have to abide to it, to what extent, in terms of flexibility of content, how much can we deviate from those guidelines? What is in that document, right? Or those documents. So again, I think it ties well with, you know, the whole, what we've been talking about so far, that, you know, we have these institutions in place, different councils, we have people in the government making decisions, trying to ensure equity in education, right? But at the end of the day, these policies that are in place, these standards, these documents, while yes, they are important and they are evidence-based, meaning that, you know, they're created by experts in the field after research and address and considering, ideally, these documents consider different populations. So even though these documents are written with all of the different factors in mind, again, the truth of the matter is that the human being and humans' competence, humans' understanding, and how people learn, there is no one size fits all, right? And we know this especially in our context as well, because we also have different affordances according to schools and etc. Many things to consider. So because of all these various factors, while they do exist, we also have to keep in mind that we're able to not necessarily abide by them 100%. But they do exist. So does anyone want to comment on the content of the video? President Obama there talking about the Common Core and encouraging different states to follow it, etc., and how they wanted to get rid of it in the Trump administration. Anyone want to comment about that, about the politics of these standards?
What I noticed is when I was watching it is that they are having the same problems and same issues that we have here. The person was explaining that the Common Core standards don't always match, you know, the curriculum. And that's the same issue we have here in Puerto Rico. Most of the time, due to many factors, we cannot truly we can use standards, at least in my experience, you know, in my classroom. I use the standards just for guidance. If I see that my students do not have like the level, I will adapt it or not use them, you know, because we need to adapt. And the person was explaining that that's the reason, the main reason that they want to get rid of it, because the core standards do not really, you know, match the curriculum. They have a lot of, you know, a lot of cultures together in sometimes in one town, and a lot of, you know, different situations, and they don't really, from their point of view, they don't really serve their purpose. So that's what I wanted to comment.
That's a really good observation, Jorita, about similar issues, different contexts, right? Does anyone, I think this is probably something universal to any public institution, catering to different peoples, right? Does anyone want to add to Jorita's? Do you agree with Jorita that maybe we shouldn't use it, or do you see a use in sort of abiding by that?
It's by the standards, you mean?
I mean, that's not up to us to decide. I mean, we can use them, we can reference them, but we don't have any control over it. So
By any standard, hypothetically speaking. So here we have, I've opened just page, doesn't matter the page, core standard, an example. This is page 12. Grade 3 students, grade 4, grade 5, and here you have expectations of key ideas and details of literature, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas. So all these different categories, range of reading and level of text complexity. ¿Verdad? So some key ideas and details of teaching literature to grade 3 students. Ask and answer questions to demonstrate understanding of a text. So this is pretty broad, you know? So it's not like this is specific knowledge that you must do this, but that you can adapt well enough this general observation to any class. So ask and answer. Grade 4, refer to details and examples in a text. So this is now exercising more of an active cognitive exercise of recall, ¿verdad? Recall versus ask and answer, que es más impromptu at the moment. Refer to something requires more mental exercise. And then grade 5, quote accurately, né? How it refines. So in terms of how to recall, how to talk about things and ideas and details, the skills adapt according to levels. So mira, ask and answer, refer to, and quote accurately. So again, no issue yet, but these are kind of, again, guidelines. Any comments as to having this example here in the screen and watching the video? Mm-hmm.
I believe that
Sorry, I'm gonna mute
standards-
myself.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, I believe the standards are useful as guidelines because it overall is good that teachers have some sort of a guide to what it is they expect us to comply with. Nevertheless, well, I don't know if it's a nevertheless, but either way, the standards are pretty wide and we can integrate our ideas measuring our students' needs. For example, it says ask and answer questions to demonstrate understanding of a text, referring explicit, blah, blah, blah. We can add the activities that care for our students' needs, and we can put that standard there because we are complying with that standard, only that it is depending on our students' proficiency levels. So I believe that is good in a way that we have some sort of standards, so some sort of structure, but also we should have the creative process and the power to do things according to our students.
Good, exactly, Maria Angeli. It's just a guideline, but at the same time, if we look at these guidelines that are, you know,